Sanctions, the weapon that never works the way you think it does. In 2022, the world's most powerful economies launched what they called unprecedented sanctions against Russia. The ruble would collapse, the economy would crater, the war would end within months. 2 years later, Russia's economy grew faster than Germany's. So, either every economist was wrong, or sanctions don't actually work the way we've been told they do. And if you look at the last 70 years of economic warfare, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Here's what actually happens when one country tries to strangle another's economy. Let's start with what sanctions are supposed to do. The theory is elegant, almost beautiful in its simplicity. You cut off a country's access to money, technology, and trade. Their economy suffers. Their people suffer. Public pressure builds. The government caves or collapses. Democracy wins. Credits roll. It's a strategy that sounds perfect in a boardroom. No soldiers die, no bombs drop, just ledgers and shipping routes and frozen bank accounts. Clean, surgical, modern. Except it almost never works that way. A 2005 study looked at 174 sanctions campaigns between 1914 and 1990. The success rate? 34%. And that's being generous with the definition of success. We're talking partial compliance, minor policy shifts, symbolic victories. The full regime change, total capitulation scenarios we imagine when we hear the word sanctions, those happen less than 5% of the time. So why do we keep using them? Because the alternative is either doing nothing or going to war. Sanctions occupy this strange middle ground between diplomacy and military force. They let politicians say they're doing something without risking the lives of their own citizens. It's policy theater that feels like action. But here's where it gets complicated. The moment you announce sanctions, three things happen simultaneously. First, the target country starts building workarounds. Black markets flourish, shell companies multiply, trade routes shift overnight. You sanction Russian oil, and suddenly it's being sold as Indian oil at a markup. The supply chain doesn't disappear, it just becomes invisible. Second, the target government doesn't weaken, it consolidates. Because now they have an external enemy to blame for every internal problem. Food shortages? That's not corruption, that's sanctions. Currency collapse? Not mismanagement, it's economic warfare. Sanctions hand authoritarian regimes the perfect scapegoat, and they use it ruthlessly. Third, and this is the part nobody talks about, ordinary people absorb the damage. Not the oligarchs, not the generals, not the people making the decisions you're trying to influence. Look at Iraq in the 1990s. Comprehensive sanctions, the most aggressive economic blockade in modern history. Saddam Hussein stayed in power for another 13 years. Meanwhile, child mortality rates doubled. 500,000 kids died from malnutrition and preventable disease, according to UNICEF estimates at the time. The regime survived, the population didn't. Iran, same story. Decades of sanctions. The government is still there, but inflation hit 40%. The currency lost 90% of its value. Cancer patients couldn't get chemotherapy drugs. Diabetics couldn't access insulin. The Revolutionary Guard didn't miss a single paycheck. North Korea has been under sanctions for 70 years. 70! The Kim dynasty is on its third generation. The country has nuclear weapons now, but the average North Korean is 2 inches shorter than their South Korean counterpart because of chronic malnutrition during childhood. The people with power insulate themselves. The people without power starve. And it's not just humanitarian disaster. Sanctions create economic damage in the countries imposing them too. When the US sanctioned Russia, Europe lost its cheap natural gas, energy prices exploded, German factories shut down, British households faced heating bills they couldn't afford, the European economy slipped toward recession, while Russia found new buyers in China and India. American farmers lost access to Russian fertilizer markets. Boeing lost billions in suspended deals. Every sanction is also a self-imposed trade barrier, and trade barriers cost jobs. But the math gets even stranger when you zoom out, because sanctions only work if everyone participates, and increasingly, everyone doesn't. China doesn't care about Western sanctions, neither does India, neither do most countries in Africa, Latin America, or Southeast Asia. They'll keep trading with whoever offers the best deal, because their economies can't afford to pick sides in someone else's conflict. So you end up with this bizarre two-tiered global economy. The West over here, following the rules it wrote. Everyone else over there, doing business as usual. And the more sanctions we use, the faster that second tier grows. Russia got kicked out of SWIFT, the global banking network, so now they're building alternatives with China. Iran trades in yuan. India pays for Russian oil in rupees. The financial infrastructure that gave the US and Europe leverage for decades is quietly being replicated outside their control. Every sanction accelerates that process. There's a deeper irony here. Sanctions were supposed to be the civilized alternative to war, the moral high ground. But when you deliberately crash an economy, when you block food and medicine, when hundreds of thousands of people die from the ripple effects, what exactly makes that more humane than a military intervention? At least in a war, we admit what we're doing. Here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to answer. If sanctions rarely achieve their goals, cause massive civilian suffering, hurt the economies imposing them, and push the world toward a fragmented financial system that undermines Western influence, why do we still treat them as the default response to every international crisis? Maybe because admitting they don't work would mean admitting we don't actually have good options, that some problems can't be solved with pressure, that the world is more complicated than our policy tools can handle. Or maybe we just haven't found a better way to look like we're doing something when we don't know what else to do. Either way, the next time you hear about a new round of sanctions, ask yourself, who's really going to feel this, and what happens when they do and nothing changes?